You're getting it now? Aishwarya, start Facebook Live too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are starting live.
Go ahead, Raghavan. Raghavan, you are muted, please.
Now only she has unmuted.
Yeah.
Good evening. Apology for the delayed start. On behalf of SICKI and Mitra, we welcome you to this very important session on agri sector by Dr. Ravi Prasad, former President, Coromandel International. We welcome Mr. Narayanan Vellayan, the Chairman of SICKI Agri Committee. Welcome Mr. Vellayan, past President SICKI. May now request Mr. Ganapathy, President, to kindly deliver the form welcome address, please.
Thanks, Dr. Raghavan. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on what I believe is truly one of the most important subjects for discussion in the scenario as we emerge out of COVID-19. As Sudhir was mentioning earlier, some indications have started to emerge about how life, which are the parts of India that will come back to normal progressively. So while that is something that we will get into during the course of the discussions, I would like to thank Dr. Prasad for agreeing to share his thoughts on this, and also our Chairman of the Agriculture Committee, Mr. Narayan Vellayan, who needs no introduction, coming as he does from the family of the Murugappa Group, a highly respected business group in India. Suffice to say that if agriculture goes wrong, nothing else will have a chance to go right in a country. And it's the only riches a country has that stays within the country. Farm to fork, as it is often referred to, is what defines what you pay for. I still recall having a dinner one day overseas, and my American friend said this piece of onion could well be 3 years ago, because that's how they have built the cold storage, warehousing, etc., and ensured that the difference between farm and fork is not more than 20% or even less. Nordic countries have managed it very well, less than 10%. Even developing countries like Indonesia are at about 20-22%. But India is at a very staggering high, and I'm sure Dr. Ravi Prasad will share that figure with you, which will be quite revealing for most of us. So amongst all these things, with every challenge gives us an opportunity. This is as good a time as to reboot our agricultural sector entirely, greater mechanization, better warehousing, technology for storage, etc., and ensure that the farmers get the correct price, the farmers get the best inputs, and also the consumer gets a product at very affordable prices. And with these few thoughts on agriculture, and I'm not best qualified to talk about it, but to introduce the subject and set the context for this afternoon, I invite Mr. Narayan Vellayan. Over to you, Narayan. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, Mr. President. Friends, the COVID-19 pandemic has turned our world topsy-turvy. Indian agriculture has always been resilient, like silver. In spite of the erratic monsoons, low mechanization, small farm holdings, etc., its enterprising farmers have resolutely taken up the challenge of feeding the 130 crore plus population. I am therefore optimistic that this too shall pass, and Indian agriculture will emerge stronger than ever out of this crisis. At this juncture, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Ravi Prasad. Doc, as he is fondly known, has been associated with the Indian agri-input industry for over 38 years. He's well known in agri-input circles as a knowledge bank on agriculture. His ability to understand the nitty-gritty of government policy has made him the go-to man on policy-related matters. Over the last 2 decades, he has played a pivotal role in promoting specialty nutrition and organic fertilizers in India, much before it became the trend that it is today. I would like to invite Doc to spend the next 20 minutes or so taking us through the impact of COVID-19 on Indian agriculture and also share with us the reasons for his optimism about the same. Over to you, Doc.
Yeah, before Dr. Ravi Prasad comes in, I'll just kind of set the ball rolling as far as Dr. Ravi Prasad's talk is concerned. This is T. S. Sudhir this side. I've known Dr. Ravi Prasad for well over a decade. He used to be a regular on NDTV's business shows on NDTV Profit. And few people, as Narayan said, understand the dynamics of agriculture better than him. Now, having covered agriculture for the better part of my journalistic career as well as the rural economy, I would be keen to know from Dr. Ravi Prasad if he sees this entire COVID-19, the lockdown, the migration of labor that we are witnessing from the urban areas to the countryside as a positive or a negative for Indian agriculture. Now, agriculture unfortunately hits the headlines more for farmer suicides. And I find it deeply ironical that all of India is now looking at a life and death kind of a situation. Dr. Ravi Prasad will speak for the next 8 to 9 odd minutes, after which we will throw the floor open for questions, and he would take all of them because extremely knowledgeable about the agriculture sector, and I'm sure there will be a lot of questions coming his way this afternoon. Dr. Ravi Prasad, over to you. Your mic is live.
Thank you. Sudhir, thank you, Mr. Ganapathy, for the kind words. Raghavan inviting me on. Mr. A. Villayan, who is along with the group. Nana Villayan, who has introduced me so well. And next 8-10 minutes, I'll try to take you through what COVID-19 has done to Indian agriculture and how we should be in a state of preparedness for the next Kharif crop, which is starting from the first fortnight of June. Getting back into what has happened, what did the farmers really suffer from? If you look at them, they were suffering from the product availability in the last part of the Kharif, the Rabi season. Harvesting has started, and the government was not in a position to offer them any passes or movement capabilities. Mechanization was still a little far off for harvesting. Fruits and vegetables started rotting in the villages, and the only thing the farmers were getting on their cell phones or smartphones was wash your hands, stay separately, and practice stay at home. And they're all worried what's going to happen to the harvest. Fortunately, COVID-19 has struck Indian agriculture in the last part of the financial year, March 22nd onwards. We have started practicing Janata curfew, and today is the 41st day. So the farmer took upon himself to start harvesting using harvesters, and there were restrictions for movement of harvesters. Finances were not available, and when he started harvesting product, there were no buyers for his product, and it took an effort after the 14th of April for the buyers to come in through state government supported systems. What happened to the produce of fruits and vegetables? For the first few days, they were rotting in the field. And then once the farmers found out that they can shop their products directly without use of a middleman, they started selling vegetables at street corners in villages, towns. Thereby, I think it's a process of eliminating the middleman. The agricultural input industry, whether it's seeds, fertilizers, agrochemicals, or even parts of rural mechanization, started suffering from what you call lack of manpower or labor at a critical time. Continuous manufacturing units like ammonia manufacturers, sulfuric acid manufacturers, etc., were asked to shut down immediately by the government authorities. And it is difficult for continuous manufacturing industry to shut down immediately because there's a cooling time required for shutting down such plants. What happened to the seed industry? Those who had started bringing in seeds into the godowns for processing, whether it is today we have brought in nearly 90% of the country's corn requirement. Wheat and paddy are just coming inside. Vegetable seeds have already come into godowns, and so has cotton. Certification of these seeds is required for the next crop, which is vital. Fortunately for us, during the last 41 days, things have started rolling. And if you see the woes of the Indian industry, which are many, Agriculture is one which has turned around faster than many other industries. In the month of April, the sale of fertilizers and movement of fertilizers has been 30% more than the corresponding of last year. India has produced the record fertilizer production this year, and the sale has exceeded over 600 million metric tons of material, of 6 crores tons of material, and 29 million metric tons of nutrients. Agrochemical business has shot up from 38 to 40,000 crores. 50% of it is exported, and the seed industry has done well. All this has happened during the last 8 days before 31st of March. That is when the Janata curfew was announced. What happened to the output business? We have produced the highest food grain production, surpassing the earlier year. We have crossed 191 million metric tons of food grain, 341 million metric tons of fruits and vegetables, and we are ready to surpass this records for the year 2021, that is Kharif and Rabi. I think it will be difficult for us to understand what the rural India sector has been passing through, because the lack of rural credit has hit their wage earnings. Migration of labor, which has started after the 25th of March, became a boon to the farming community, because labor who had left the cities migrated, went back to their hometowns and villages. Therefore, the farmers had found these people for employing them, either using them for harvesting or even loading and unloading activities. Farming is now started to becoming a business for years, which was actually a sort of a subsistence farming going on in India. And what should the Indian government do for Kharif 2020? Today, we have very little storage capacity. We have 100 million metric tons of cereals and wheat as our buffer stock. We are supposed to have at least 320 million equivalent metric tons of storage. And the cold storage capacity today is at about 39 million metric tons, whereas we produce close to 350 million metric tons of fruits and vegetables. So this has to go and be enhanced to about 100 million metric tons, which is planned by the government of India. What should we prepare today? Seed industry is now ready to start moving their finished product into the field, be it corn, cotton, or paddy or wheat. Government should be able to provide them necessary trucks and infrastructure for loading and moving material. Fertilizers, which have been stocked well, will be made available to the farming community during Kharif, and we have enough of urea, enough of required for the first 6 months. The concentration of the government of India should be on to flow or push rural credit into the farming area, so that the retailer who is today strapped of cash is helped to plow back cash into his system, and the farmer is able to get his full payment for his Rabi crop from the government faster than earlier times. Sugar business should switch over to pushing more of alcohol, manufacture, rather than giving alcohol for gasohol mixing with the petrol. The Indian government should enable export of alcohol, because alcohol today is being used worldwide for manufacturing sanitizers. India does require sanitizers, so the Indian sugar industry should be able to push extra production of alcohol into sanitizer areas of manufacture and also into overseas exports. Looking at the next 60 days, which are crucial, slowly the freight trains have started coming back online. Today, the government is able to load and move around 100 rakes of 3,600 tons capacity. Truckers have started coming back onto line. As of today, the capacity of the 87% of the trucker capacity has started moving in. And so has also been the procurement of food grains and movement from places like far-off Punjab into areas of demand and requirement. COVID-19 really has not struck any negative chord as far as the rural Indian market is concerned, but the preparedness for Kharif 2020 is vital so that the 130 crore population is fed regularly, properly, and the farmers are also rewarded for their function as well as they get their returns for the harvest they have procured and submitted and delivered to the Government of India. And the agri-input industry, whether it is agrochemicals who are supposed to import material from far off China for manufacturing their products, they should be able to concentrate on domestic manufacture for the time being, not depending on cheap intermediates from China, because the intermediates can also be manufactured in India, though at a slightly higher cost. And therefore, thus industry should look inward for self-sufficiency rather than looking for imports from China. Specialty fertilizers like potassium nitrate, water solubles will find a great demand because the farmer is now understanding that the quicker he is able to grow the crop with a uniform maturity, the better are his rewards and his pricing. I feel and I find that agriculture will have to turn around to become as a spearheader of Indian economy from what it was about 40, 50 years back. Right today, the tourism industry, aviation, whether it's all infrastructure or real estate are at the bottom of the pyramid. And I would place agriculture right at the top, close to pharmaceutical industry and the services industry. The future looks bright to me. In fact, if cooperative farming is started by the government through large houses taking up cultivation of the farmers, what you call marginal lands, and then giving them inputs and technology and turning around agriculture as a business for exports, I think the Indian farmer would have arrived on the international arena. I feel that the migrant workers population should also be what you call protected and given special camps wherein the input industry, whether it is a fertilizer industry or the agrochemical industry or the seed industry, are able to provide them the testing facilities and also nutrition, and then give them places where they can be easily moved around without contaminating the rest of the population. It's a Herculean task because continuous manufacturing process industry requires at any point of time 3,000 to 4,000 people contract and also actively management supported people. And to keep them with social distancing or what you call isolation would be difficult. But unless and until we practice with rigor, it would be difficult to run continuous manufacturing industries at 30% or 40% capacity. Right today, the industry is limping back into production, and most of the plants, whether they are urea, superphosphate, phosphatic industry, is started production, while capacity utilization is still about 40 to 50%. I hope that by middle of May, after the probable release of further what you call freer movements, continuous industry will be able to take the challenge and take it up for the movement further. Rural credit, however, should flow continuously, and my banking friends and banking industry should be able to work almost continuously 7 days in a week, so that they are able to transfer the proceeds to the farmer, whether it's from the Jan Dhan account or from a support account, so that the farmer does not feel the need to borrow from a money lender. It would be difficult to cover various what you call input industries in detail, but I felt that at this point of time, the agriculture industry is on an upswing, and with a clearer focus and a sharper work target, India's food production, which is very desired for feeding its 130 crores. Next year, it's supposed to produce 298 million metric tons of food grains. We should be able to surpass that record. I hope, Sudhir, I've been able to meet up your time limit. Though the opening was a little jari, in the sense that the electronic connections were not going through. But possibly I should be able to live up to your expectations of answering questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ravi Prasad, for this exhaustive kind of look at how Indian agriculture will fare in a post-COVID era. But the one takeaway that I have from your 8 to 10 minute long presentation is that agriculture seems to do better when the rest of India actually shuts up. Is that the correct takeaway, that agriculture seems to have done pretty well for itself, even though the rest of India has been in lockdown?
Yes.
Could you hear me? What I meant to say was, has Indian agriculture done pretty decently, even though the country has been in a lockdown? It does not seem to have impacted it to the extent the way it has impacted other industries.
Absolutely, absolutely, in the sense that the farmer has understood that his importance of delivering the harvest in times of what you call need, not worrying about what you call the infectious nature of this particular dreaded virus. He had still gone to the fields and started practicing cutting, chopping, threshing, bagging, and moving material. And it is nice that in a way that it struck us in the month of March. Had it struck us during the month of November or October, it would have been total mayhem, because the farmer would not have been able to harvest anything, and the country would have gone through a lot of harvesting losses, and we would not have been sitting on top of a pile of food grains today.
What we are witnessing today on the national highways of the country is a large number of migrant population actually walking back home. And that, I think, is a very tragic sight. People walking from Hyderabad to Chhattisgarh to towns like Balaghat in Madhya Pradesh, some even actually daring to trek all the way to Uttar Pradesh. There have been people coming from Nagpur going towards Tamil Nadu, cutting across Karnataka, Telangana, etc.
Correct.
Do you see this huge population that feels very let down by the urban population, that you don't have work to do, you don't know what to do, you have to kind of fend for yourself just depending on the giveaways by people, VIPs posing for photographs? What happens if they choose to stay back? You made the point that actually now they will all be there as agricultural laborer in the farms in their villages. What happens? Do you see the possibility of them staying back, choosing to be an agri-rich instead of an urban poor?
Why did they actually come to the cities? They found agriculture was not rewarding. Therefore, they had migrated to the cities to work as a security guard.
Does that change now? Does that change now?
That is going to change. Because the moment the farmer is getting his dues of a correct price and in time, and he's able to produce a lot of output, which is supported by government, of course, then the guys who had actually come from the villages to migrate would find it more comfortable and a little more healthier and safer for him to stay back in his village rather than sit in a crowded city and get into the mercy of this virus. I personally feel though 50% of the population might get back, the balance 50% of migratory, what you call workers, would find a place in the village. And that is where I think government should concentrate on providing vocational employment for those guys in the village.
That's a big point you're making, because if 50% of them actually decide that their life in the villages is better than the life in the cities that they were leading. For instance, Telangana's Municipal Administration Minister, Industry Minister K.T. Ramarao was telling me the other day that a large number of the workers who had gone home for Holi to Bihar did not come back, because by the time the Janta curfew, etc. was announced. Now that leaves a big gap, because they are apparently specialists in packing the gunny bags in which to stock all the food grain. So there is now that big gap happening. If 50% of people, as you say, choose not to return to the cities, do you see that gap taking place in the urban areas?
See, if you look at this typical case of construction, marble layers, what you call masons, etc., are all coming from Orissa, Bihar, West Bengal into Telangana and Andhra Pradesh.
That's right.
Now, with the real estate market going down south, the infrastructure market going south, there are no jobs for these people, even if they wish to stay back in a city for doing a job. There would be switchover of jobs.
Yes.
Mechanization has to come in. Yes, the gunny bag has to be stitched not by a human being, but probably a machine. Instead of packing 75 kg, they may have to pack 60 kgs and do it. So there will be changes in the whole working pattern of these areas. And infrastructure companies need not in future start building roads or dams. They may have to start building cold storages. So the opportunistic change is going up, and it is for the guys to identify where they find that opportunity and put their money there. Because with infrastructure going down, there's not money for building up buildings. Therefore, I think there will be a change in the total vocational, what you call, job functions of these semi-skilled and unskilled people.
Yes, so in that sense, this could actually be COVID-19, post-COVID-19 world could actually be a game changer. One question coming from Mr. Kalidas Pramanik from Coromandel International. His question is, during lockdown period, informal income of farmers was not there. Post-COVID-19, what is your view about farmers' income despite bumper crop?
See, there was up to between 22nd of March to 14th of April, there were no clear signals emerging to the farming community who is going to buy his wheat or paddy, or at what price are they going to buy. When the government started buying directly from the mandis and also from the wholesaler directly, and the money has started getting what you call filled in, credited to the farmer's account. Whereas today, let us say in the state of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, farmers are pretty happy that they have received money back into their accounts, and they would expect this to continue in a bigger way. There has been a delay, but I think after the 14th of April, money has started flowing back to the farmers' pockets.
Okay, this question coming in from Mr. Ravichandra Babu. Now he's talking about the small holding landholding farmers. He says that would they be better off with a government subsidy directly to their pocket rather than giving them agriculture loans, which in any case later on at the state government level or at the central government level gets waived off. Now most of the time their efforts are wasted due to a host of reasons. Either the monsoon is not good enough, or their failure to reach their produce to the distribution centers, or basically inefficient use of resources. What's your take on it?
See, a marginal farmer who owns less than 2 hectares, or let us say 2 acres of land, today only produces food for himself and a little for his neighbors, that is the local mandis. All along, he has been taking from the district cooperative central banks and rural banks some crop loans. And when he goes for the next tranche, he is told to pay back the old loan. And he waits for a loan waiver scheme to come forward, and when his loan is cleared. Subsidy, which is going to be paid directly on account of fertilizers to the farmer's Jan Dhan account, would enable him to purchase these inputs. Instead of using the bank loan, he'll be using the Jan Dhan account money for doing it. But any which way, the output or earnings which he is going to earn out of his marginal farm holding is not going to make him rich unless the whole process is, as I told you, a cooperative structure comes in, whereas the ownership of the land remains with the farmer, but a large house is able to take about 10,000 hectares of land on lease, provide what you call inputs, technology, and then boost up production, and then share the job, what you call a lease amount with the farmer. That is where these what you call small farmers will benefit, rather than trying to grow something in their 2 acre or 3 acre patch.
Mr. Chandrasekharan calls crop insurance as a farce. He says, what can be done to make it workable?
See, I have never heard the last 38 years any farmer saying that he has insured his field. In fact, it's more out of duress. Whenever you buy a bag of urea of a particular company, he gets what you call insurance for his loss of limb or life for a particular amount in the farm. That's one type of insurance which has been commonly promoted in the country. Whereas crop insurance has always been talked on the news, probably in an editorial, but has never actually been understood or felt by the farmers. Most
Hmm.
farmers feel that even if the crop fails because of hailstones or drought, government will find some method not to give them their entire what you call insured amount, and therefore they have credibility on this area.
Okay. Dr. Raghavan from Sikki asked whether Prime Minister's scheme of giving 6,000 rupees, will that help farmers? And he feels that more farm money should be given to the farmers.
See, fundamentally, we always talk about two things. One is crop loan waiver, which happens once in maybe 15 years or 10 years, and large sums are given off. The other is the Jan Dhan account of the Prime Minister, wherein he has said 6,000 rupees per farm household for approximately 12 crore farm household, 72,000 crores has been budgeted, and then the first tranche has been paid. I personally feel that 2,000 rupees or 6,000 rupees for a farm household is not very high. It should be enhanced substantially to at least 10,000 rupees, wherein he's able to what you call rustle up some amount of input efficiency and improve his livelihood. 6,000 rupees is neither here nor there.
You did touch upon both urea and fertilizers in your talk. Gopi Dharmalingam asked, what will be the demand for organic fertilizers as chemical fertilizers import is affected by COVID-19?
See, whether we...
Dr. Ravi Prasad, you have lost your video. Aishwarya, could you check whether you've lost the connection with Dr. Ravi Prasad?
I'm checking that. I'm checking that.
Friends, just bear with us. We'll just reconnect with Dr. Ravi Prasad in a moment.
He's connecting back. He got disconnected and he's connecting back.
Right. I think agriculture does need a liberal dose of technology.
He's come back in.
He has come back.
I can't see him yet. Dr. Ravi Prasad, you can hear me?
Hear you? Start your video. Okay. Yeah. Can you? Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Organic fertilizers, as you know, have been in existence in the country, whether you talk about garbage being converted into compost or cow dung, etc. The question of replacing what you call organic urea and phosphatics with organic fertilizer doesn't happen at all. So it's a complementary product, much used for increasing the soil organic carbon levels, and which will improve your long-term productivity for not only this generation, but for the generations to come. Like when we got independence, our organic carbon content was about 5%. Today we are at 0.25%. So unless this is replenished back, then only these chemical fertilizers which are using will be able to be assimilated by the crop and used for their own nourishment and yield. Otherwise, I don't think just pumping chemical fertilizers will help the yields to come up.
GV Subbareddy just sent in a question whether there will be any change in cropping pattern in the, the next Kharif, the next Rabi.
Now, I think if government takes it upon yourself to look at the zonal, what you call crop identification. Like if you talk about paddy, it's only grown in phenomenally in deltaic regions of Kaveri Delta, Godavari Delta, Gangetic Delta, etc. Now, because somebody announced a 2 rupee kilo scheme long back, about 36 years back. Yeah. Then people started growing rice everywhere. Hello?
Yes, sir. Go on. We can hear you.
So today, you cannot grow rice everywhere. You can grow rice only in those areas which have a deltaic soil. So at some point of time, the farmer is going to decide what
Hmm.
crop is going to take up. And unless it's going to be a mutual discussion between the farming community and the government, people tend to cultivate as whatever they feel. One crop industry which will come under a lot of pressure will be sugarcane, because of
Yes.
the volume of water it's going to use. So
Yes.
it is quite possible that the sugarcane farmers will reorient themselves into some other crop and not grow sugarcane as what they have been growing.
Okay. I like the basic narrative in your talk and even in your answers has been that a lot of reorientation that is probably required as far as Indian agriculture is concerned. Himanshu Tiwari asking a question, and which also kind of pertains to this. He says, right now, marketing of input supplies to the farmers has been an issue because of various restrictions imposed by the government. Do you see this as a trigger point for a paradigm shift in buying behavior of the farmers from big brick and mortar dealer shops to online marketing or telemarketing?
Right today, many chemical companies have started using the e-commerce route to deliver products into the farmer's house. They had started basically shops which are called company retail showrooms. Many fertilizer companies have started doing it. And farmers in the beginning used to visit the shops for looking at the product and getting it delivered. Now the farmer orders the stock on a smartphone, considering the rates which are being offered, and the companies are also delivering to the farmer's house through an auto rickshaw. And therefore, I think this would increase. And I would also feel that the need for opening glitzy showrooms will not be required for selling fertilizers and agrochemicals. In fact, it's the timely delivery and competitive pricing, which is what will enhance such what you call e-commerce business.
Right. You just now mentioned about sugar industry and how the sugarcane farmers will need to reorient themselves. Now, the sugar industry has been through its own issues over the last 5 years or so. Many of the sugar companies also defaulting, shutting off their factories. Ravichandra Babu asking the specific question as to when will this industry be revived and what should be the efforts from the government to support such a revival?
Fundamentally, government, if you have, as I suggested to you, that is one crop which is supported by the government extensively, and farmers are leasing their lands to grow, let us say, in the command area of the sugar factory, let's say 25,000 acres, everybody grows sugarcane. All inputs are given by the sugar mill, and then on the cutting date, the sugarcane inspector comes, certifies your bricks content, cuts the cane, delivers to the what you call sugar mill. The sugar mill pays the farmer. But what has happened over years? Water shortages and drought have claimed a lot of what you call impact on the growth potential of sugar. Number two, the what you call the movement of, let's say, sugar into the consumer industry has also started getting a sort of a block because of excessive diabetic patients who are being generated in India. We today have about 10 crore diabetic patients in India. So sugar started becoming a stigma for the human consumer. And with 28,000 liters of water required to produce 1 kilo of sugar, and also wherein the sugar industry has to switch over to drip irrigation, I think these changes will be inevitable. And with the rising price of alcohol, especially for what you call exports, sugar industry has to reorient itself in this context. Less will come from sugar, more will come from alcohol and power generation.
The narrative so far has been that the village economy can actually get bolstered and everything will kind of revolve around agriculture. J.M. Domadia from Coromandel International, Gujarat asks, what kind of steps should be taken by the government of India to rebuild economy at the village level? Does it have to be built around agriculture? Is that how you see it?
I personally feel that the unit of the assessment should become a mandal, or let's say you talk about a village. Today, India has got about 6 lakh villages. And if you look at urbanization, how many villages went away.
Hmm.
Therefore, the government has to relook at village-wise and how many what you call farmers have to be looked at, brought in. What is the economic level of these farmers? And that, I think the agrarian economy build-up has to start, because the other industries have, because of the virtue of the problems of COVID, working capital issues have slid down. So if somebody has to be shouldered and pushed up, it is agriculture at this point of time. And I think the reallocation of budgets for agriculture has to be relooked by the finance minister and by the government.
Right. Mr. Ganapathy stays focused on onions. He writes, driving from Nasik, I've seen farmers dump onions on the highway. It's a clear message that the supply chain needs to be reviewed. Your suggestion on ensuring a fair price to the farmer and a fair cost to the consumer, it wouldn't affect the intermediary, but isn't eliminating them the solution?
Eliminating the middleman is very difficult, because see, the middleman comes in different forms. He can be what you call a guy who is consolidating what you call in a village to a taluka level. But as Mr. Ganapathy said, if the returns to the farmer are improved by, let's say, 20% from what he's getting today, then the farmer is quite happy. Let's say the farmer is able to produce tomatoes and is selling you at 5 rupees a kilo, and you buy in the market at 40 rupees a kilo, and the delta is 35 rupees. Well, that is not acceptable to the farmer. He says, give me 10 rupees for my cost of cultivation. Don't allow me to throw the onions, milk, and tomatoes on the street just because I could produce more. Help me with a little more, what you call, better price, and help me in constructing cold storages at every taluka level, which are necessary at this point of time. Like the world is building specialty hospitals in a jiffy. They are able to bring in a 300-bedded hospital in about 20 days. I think India has to relook at the infrastructure for agriculture, like cold storages, warehouses, etc., as their beginning of laying down a long road for agriculture to flourish and go up.
Right. Sambashivara sending this question, what would be the demand supply position of fertilizers in India in the next financial year, 2020-21?
Demand for, I didn't catch you, Sudhir.
The demand supply position of fertilizers in 2020-21.
2021 should be a very good supply, what you call, position for fertilizers, whether it is conventional fertilizer like urea. We have used this year 33 million tons of urea. I'm expecting it to go to about 33-34 million metric tons. Diammonium phosphate, we have used about 10 million tons. We'll continue to use 10 million tons. Complexes, we are at about 10 million tons. We'll do about 10 million tons. The one thing which is going to go up substantially will be potash, because the potash prices have started coming down, and therefore NPK fertilizers will start going up, and so will be specialty fertilizers.
Right. Do you see now the possibility, I mean, given the kind of scenario that you're building, do you see it would be a good idea to kind of have agriculture or an agriculture related subject, say at the school level itself, make people more aware instead of just having agriculture as a theme in a Mahesh Babu kind of a glossy film?
So if you remember, the Murugappa group had brought out a wonderful what you call jingle called Who is a Farmer? And this was going around for quite some time. And then finally he said, who is the best man? Who is giving you food? Who is giving you this? Many people could not answer it, who are all well educated. Finally it said, it's a simple farmer. So I think at a school stage, let's say class 6, etc., if a subject is introduced about Indian agriculture, food, dairying, and let's say milk and what you call fish, etc., it would enable the children to understand what is in store for them with a limited infusion of knowledge. And by the time they come to the class 11 or class 10, they are prepared to take this subject up as their career. Because all people who actually join BSc Agriculture are those people who never got a seat in medicine. MBBS, when a guy could not get an MBBS seat, he goes for BSc Agriculture. Now that should not be the choice. You can't have a second-hand choice. If it is made a first-hand choice, then possibly you'll have more intelligent people joining the agriculture route.
True, true. That's a good point. Do you see companies which are in the business of agriculture, like the Murugappa Group, tweaking their kind of core philosophy or also their strategies to deal with a post-COVID-19 world?
Right? See, most of the chemical fertilizer companies have got big turnovers and big contributions. But what they lack today, unfortunately, across the country is they are not able to serve or offer services to the farmers. Now, unless you offer a service to a farmer, wherein you give them finished product like urea, DAP, some super phosphate or specialties, and you are also buy back from them, from the farmer, the output, because you have gone and promised them that if you use my bag of specialty fertilizers, if you use my bag of urea, your crop yield will go up by 10%. Now that guy has believed you and he has also used your product, and then he has got 10% more. Then when the 10% more is produced, then the market says, oh, there's a glut in the market. We are not going to pay you the full due. So therefore, he gets the law of diminishing returns starts hitting him. If that is where fertilizer companies start buying back what you call material and then re-exporting it outside the country or distributing it and selling services, you should be in a position to say that, let's say we got a pest in your field. The technical group of the company should be able to identify the pest, offer the best solution, create the spraying facilities, and then help the farmer. Then the farmer is wedded to that company lifelong. Because if you are able to clear my problems, I don't mind being your brand ambassador.
Right. In his opening remarks, Mr. Ganapathy referred to the concept of farm to fork. Now, Ravichandra Babu takes off from there and asks whether a public-private partnership can help in hastening and bridging the infrastructure gap.
Yes. See, unless a bank like NABARD today, what does NABARD do? NABARD actually helps agriculture credit. But if a bank like NABARD is able to come forward and then say amalgamation of, let's say, 2 talukas in a particular district as a pilot, they take 500 acres of land and then ask a large fertilizer company to what you call practice agriculture and increase the productivity of that particular 500 acres, then it becomes a showpiece for the rest of the country to mimic and multiply.
Kalidas Pramanik asking a second question. Do you feel new emerging social behavior will change consumption behavior into reduction in cereal?
Yeah.
I think you need to unmute. Dr. Ravi Prasad unmuted? Yeah. Kalidas Pramanik asking whether you feel new emerging social behavior will change food consumption behavior, leading to a reduction in cereal acreage.
I personally feel that the eating habits of the Indians, which changed dramatically between 2000 and 2020 because of the influx of, let us say, pizzas, hot dogs, burgers, will start receding. In fact, because it's not only non-availability, but it's also change of food habits should set in now. People will like to get back to greens, and then they like to drink more milk, and possibly there can be a differential food eating habits will change. Because and two, the socio-economic behavior of what you call marketing foods will also change. It took 18 years for Kellogg's to popularize their what you call early morning breakfast among Indians. But will it take 18 years for them to what you call declog that? I don't think so. Indians can go off the morning breakfast and go back to rice and curd faster than milk and what you call your wafers or whatever it is. So the changing habits can hit very fast. And when it starts hitting very fast, I think the cultural change will get a knock, and I hope the Indian foods are back into business and we are able to benefit out of this COVID interaction.
In fact, at a press conference, I think 2 Sundays back, Telangana Chief Minister K. Chandrasekhar Rao had actually ridiculed people who wanted the
Pizza
Swiggy's and the
delivery.
Zomatos to be open. He said, what happens if we don't eat pizza for some time? And he was a little confused. Is it pasta or is it pizza? So I guess you have a point out there. Thank you very much for patiently answering all the questions and giving us an overview of how life, especially in the agriculture sector, will change post COVID-19. And it's very heartening to know that things will actually look up in the agri sector and not keep getting negative news from the farmers and from the countryside. Thank you very much. Apologize for a few technical glitches.
Thank you,
to all the
Sudhir.
participants.
Excellent comparing. Excellent comparing.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Mr.
Prasad.
Ganapathy. Thank you, Mr. Raghavan.
May I request
Narayan.
Mr. Sumi Hazare to propose a vote of thanks.
Yes.
Heard. Yeah, can I be heard?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you're loud and clear.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Siki and Mitra, it is my pleasure to place on record our gratitude to Dr. Prasad for his excellent presentation, displaying his valuable thoughts and inputs on agriculture with us. This
Thank
has
you.
been supported by Century Flour Mills, and I thank Ravi and his team who have come forward to support this series, especially at a difficult time like this. T.S. Sudhir has been a well-known journalist and anchor who has always been appreciated by one and all, be it speakers, the panelists, and of course the audience. Sudhir has been, I think, one of the best anchors that we have been able to get, and I thank Sudhir very much for sparing his time today. Thanks to the friends who have joined us on Facebook and on other platforms, and the efforts put in by Siki, the entire secretariat led by Dr. Raghavan and Aishwarya have really sweated to put this together, given the restrictions that are there because of this COVID. Before I close, I would just like to remind everybody that tomorrow at 4 p.m. we will be having a session on tourism, and the speaker would be Dr. PGP, the chairman of the Royal Meridian Group, who has also been our past president. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you once again, Dr. Ravi Prasad and Sudhir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Stay safe and good night.
Thank you, Mr. Ganapathy. Thank you, Sudhir.
Thank you. Thank you, Prasad.
Thanks a lot, Doctor, and thanks, Will
Thank
and
you.
Narayan. Deeply appreciate.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.